In 2013, a man in Texas was convicted of murder, even though there was no body, no witnesses, and no physical evidence tying him to any crime. Marcus Reed was 32 years old, a quiet warehouse worker living in East Texas. He kept to himself, worked long shifts, sent money to his mother every month. Neighbors described him as respectful, the kind of man who nodded when he passed by but never stayed long enough to talk. For years, nothing about Marcus stood out, until one afternoon in late August. A woman named Denise Harper reported her boyfriend missing. His name was Calvin Briggs. He was 41, known around town, loud, sometimes aggressive, but he had connections. People knew him. Denise told police that Marcus was the last person seen with Calvin. That wasn't entirely true. Marcus had spoken to Calvin once. A brief argument outside a corner store. Witnesses said it lasted less than 2 minutes. No physical fight. No threats. Just words. But that was enough. Police brought Marcus in for questioning. He cooperated, answered everything, told them exactly what happened. He went home afterward. No one followed him. No one saw anything unusual. But something had already shifted. The story began to change. Denise gave another statement. This time, she said Calvin had been afraid of Marcus. Said there had been tension for weeks. Said Marcus had threatened him before. There was no record of that. No texts. No calls. No witnesses. But the statement stayed. Days passed. Then weeks. Calvin Briggs was still missing. Search teams looked everywhere. Woods, rivers, abandoned buildings. Nothing. No body. No crime scene. No weapon. But rumors started spreading. People in town began talking. Quiet at first, then louder. They said Marcus had done it. They said he snapped. They said he made Calvin disappear. No one could explain how, but the story kept growing. Police brought Marcus in again. This time, the questions were different. Sharper. More direct. They asked where he hid the body. Marcus said the same thing. I didn't kill anyone. But what happened next changed everything. A jailhouse informant came forward. A man named Tyler Boone. He claimed Marcus had confessed while they were both in holding. Said Marcus described how he killed Calvin. Said he even laughed about it. There was one problem. Marcus had never been in a cell with Tyler Boone. Records showed they were held on different days. But the statement was still added to the case. Then came the timeline. Prosecutors claimed Marcus had followed Calvin after the argument. Said he attacked him somewhere no one could see. Said he disposed of the body in a way that left no trace. There was no footage, no witnesses, no physical evidence. But they built the story anyway, piece by piece. By the time the case went to trial, it sounded complete. The courtroom was packed. People wanted answers. The prosecution painted Marcus as angry, unpredictable, dangerous. They repeated Denise's claims. They leaned heavily on Tyler Boone's statement. They filled the gaps with assumptions. Marcus sat quietly. His defense pointed out the holes. No body, no weapon, no forensic evidence, no confirmed timeline. But the damage had already been done. The jury listened, and after just 6 hours they reached a verdict. Guilty. Marcus Reed was sentenced to life in prison. The courtroom went silent. Some people nodded. Others looked unsure. But no one spoke up, because the story felt complete, even if the evidence wasn't. Months passed. Then something strange happened. A man in Oklahoma was arrested during a routine traffic stop. He gave a false name at first, then another. Finally, under pressure, he admitted who he was. Calvin Briggs. Alive, breathing, standing in front of police. The same man Marcus Reed had been convicted of murdering. News spread fast. People were shocked, confused. Some refused to believe it. But the fingerprints matched. The face matched. It was him. Calvin told investigators he left town on his own. Said he owed money. Said he wanted a fresh start. Said he never told anyone. He had been living under a different identity the entire time. The case against Marcus should have collapsed instantly. But it didn't. Prosecutors argued something unexpected. They claimed Marcus still intended to kill Calvin. They claimed the attempt was enough, even though no attempt had ever been proven, even though no attack had ever been confirmed. The conviction stayed. Marcus remained behind bars. Years passed. Appeals were filed. Denied. Again and again. Then one final detail surfaced. Phone records. On the night Calvin supposedly disappeared, his phone pinged in a different city, over 200 miles away from where Marcus lived. The data had been available from the beginning, but it was never presented in court. No explanation was given. By then, Marcus had already spent years in prison for a crime that never happened. A man convicted of murder, while the victim was still alive. And the deeper investigators looked, the more questions they found. But what they uncovered next was even more disturbing. In the months after Calvin Briggs was found alive, the case against Marcus Reed should have unraveled overnight. But it didn't. Instead, it became something else. Something harder to explain. Marcus was still sitting in a prison cell, still wearing the same uniform, still waking up every day to a sentence built on a crime that never happened. His legal team pushed for an emergency hearing. They brought in new evidence. Calvin Briggs himself testified. He stood in court, looked directly at the judge, and said one thing clearly: Marcus Reed never touched me. The room went quiet. For a moment, it felt like everything would finally change. But then the prosecution spoke. They didn't argue that Marcus killed Calvin anymore. They changed the narrative. They claimed Marcus had planned it, that he intended to kill Calvin but failed, that his actions still justified the conviction. There was just one problem. There were no actions, no attack, no attempt, no physical contact, nothing. The judge listened, took notes, then delayed the decision. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Marcus stayed locked up. Then something even stranger surfaced. An independent journalist named Rachel Dunn started digging into the case. She wasn't part of the original investigation. She had no ties to the town. But something about the story didn't sit right with her. She requested the full case file. First, she was denied. Then she pushed harder. Eventually, she got access, and what she found didn't make sense. Entire sections of evidence were missing. Interview transcripts were incomplete. Key timelines didn't match. It was as if parts of the case had been removed. Then she found something buried deep in the records. A witness statement, one that had never been mentioned in court. It came from a gas station clerk named Daniel Price. He claimed he saw Calvin Briggs the night he disappeared. But not near Marcus, not even in the same area. Daniel said Calvin was arguing with two unknown men outside the station. He described them clearly. One tall, one stocky, both unfamiliar. The report was time-stamped, logged, then never used. Rachel kept digging. She tracked down Daniel Price. At first, he refused to talk, said he didn't want trouble. But after some convincing, he agreed. He told her the same story. Nothing had changed. But then he added something new. He said police came back the next day, asked him to clarify his statement. When he repeated what he saw, they told him he must have been mistaken. After that, his statement disappeared from the case. Rachel published her findings. The story started gaining attention. People began asking questions. Why was this evidence ignored? Why was Marcus still in prison? Why did the case feel incomplete? Then came the next breakthrough. Phone records, not just Calvin's, but Denise Harper's, the same woman who first accused Marcus, the same woman who changed her story. Rachel noticed something unusual. On the night Calvin went missing, Denise's phone connected to a tower far outside town, the same area where Daniel Price said he saw Calvin. That didn't match her original statement. She had told police she was home all night. Rachel dug deeper. She cross-referenced timestamps, call logs, location data, and then she saw it. A number that appeared multiple times that night. A number not listed in the original investigation. Not questioned, not explained. Rachel traced it. It led to a prepaid phone. Unregistered, No name, no address, but there was one detail. The phone had been active for only 3 days. The day before Calvin disappeared, the day he vanished, and the day after. Then it went silent forever. Rachel contacted Marcus's legal team. They filed for another appeal, this time with new evidence. The hidden witness, the phone records, the inconsistencies. Pressure started building. Media picked up the story. Public opinion began to shift. Then Denise Harper was called back in for questioning. First, she stuck to her story, said nothing had changed, said Marcus was still responsible. But investigators kept pushing. They showed her the phone records, the location data, the calls. Her tone shifted. Her answers slowed. Then she asked for a lawyer. The room went quiet. Something was breaking. But before anything could be confirmed, before she could say another word, Denise Harper was found dead in her home 2 days later. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no clear cause, just silence. And just like that, the only person who could explain everything was gone. The case didn't get clearer. It got darker, because now it wasn't just about a false conviction. It was about something bigger, something hidden. And as investigators went back through the evidence one more time, they found one final detail, a detail that had been overlooked from the very beginning. Something that connected Marcus, Calvin, Denise, and that unregistered phone. But what it revealed changed the entire case again. In the weeks after Denise Harper was found dead, the case shifted again. What started as a missing person investigation had become something far more complicated. Marcus Reed was still in prison. Calvin Briggs was alive. Denise was gone. And now there was a phone no one could explain. Investigators reopened everything. They went back to the beginning. Every statement, every report, every piece of evidence. This time, they focused on the number Rachel Dunn had uncovered. The prepaid phone, active for 3 days, then gone. They pulled tower data again. More detailed this time, more precise. And what they found didn't match the original investigation. The phone didn't just move around randomly. It followed a pattern. On the first day, it pinged near Denise's house. On the second day, it traveled out of town, toward the same area Daniel Price described. On the third day, it stopped near an abandoned property just outside county lines. A place no one had searched before, a place not mentioned in any report. Investigators went there, quietly, no media, no announcements, just a small team. The property was old, falling apart, boarded windows, collapsed fencing, the kind of place people avoided. They searched the area, inside, outside, nothing at first. Then one officer noticed something behind the structure. Disturbed ground. Not fresh, but not completely settled either. They started digging. Minutes passed. Then something surfaced. Piece of fabric. Then more. Buried beneath layers of dirt. Human remains. The area went silent. For years, there had been no body. Now there was one. The remains were badly decomposed. But enough was recovered for identification. Days later, the results came back. It wasn't Calvin Briggs. It was someone else. A man named Eric Dalton, 36 years old, reported missing 2 weeks before Calvin disappeared. His case had gone cold. No suspects, no leads. Until now, everything changed again. Because now there was a real victim, a real crime, and it had been buried under a false one. Investigators went back to the phone. They reanalyzed every signal, every movement, and this time they noticed something they missed before. The prepaid phone didn't act alone. It connected repeatedly with another number. Personal number, registered, active, traceable. They ran it through the system. The name that came back stopped the room cold. It belonged to someone already involved in the case. Someone no one had questioned. Someone who had been present from the very beginning. The jailer, Thomas Hale. He was the one who processed Marcus the night he was first brought in. The one who handled evidence intake. The one who had access to everything. At first, it didn't make sense. But then they checked his records. his schedule, his location data. On the night Eric Dalton disappeared, Thomas Hale's phone pinged near that same abandoned property. The same place the body was found. The same place the prepaid phone went silent. Investigators moved fast. They brought him in for questioning. Hale stayed calm, answered questions carefully, said he had nothing to do with any of it, said he was just doing his job. But then they showed him the data, the calls, the locations, the connection to the prepaid phone. For the first time, he hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. They searched his home. Inside, they found something unexpected. A box, hidden in the back of a closet. Inside were items that didn't belong to him. A wallet, an old ID, and a watch, all traced back to Eric Dalton, the missing man, now confirmed dead. Hale was arrested, charged, and suddenly the case that once seemed simple was completely different, because now there was a real killer, a real victim, and a trail of evidence that had been ignored. But one question remained. Why frame Marcus Reed? Why build an entire case around a crime that never happened? Investigators went back again. This time, they looked at Hale's connections, his calls, his relationships. That's when they found it. A series of calls between Hale and Denise Harper, dozens of them, all leading up to the night Calvin disappeared, and then stopping abruptly after Marcus was arrested. The connection was clear, but the reason wasn't, because if Hale was involved and Denise was involved, then Calvin's disappearance wasn't random. It was part of something else, something planned, something controlled, and Marcus was never supposed to be anything more than a distraction. But before investigators could piece together the full story, before Hale said another word, before the truth could fully come out, he made one final request. Private meeting. No cameras. No recordings. Just him and one investigator. Inside that room, he agreed to talk. He agreed to explain everything. What really happened. Why Marcus was chosen. What Denise knew. And how Eric Dalton ended up buried behind that abandoned property. The door closed. The conversation started. And what he said next would change everything again. The door closed. Only one investigator sat across from Thomas Hale. No cameras. No recording devices. Just a notepad on the table. Hale leaned back in his chair. Calm. Almost too calm. For a moment he said nothing. Then he spoke. He said Eric Dalton wasn't supposed to die. It started as a robbery. Quick. Simple. No witnesses. Hale had done it before. He knew which places were quiet, which people wouldn't be missed immediately. Eric Dalton was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But something went wrong. Eric fought back. Hale lost control. And just like that, it became something else. A murder. Hale said he panicked. He needed time. He needed a distraction. That's when Denise Harper came in. They knew each other. Not closely, but enough. Denise had her own problems. Money issues, debt, pressure. Hale offered her a way out. All she had to do was help create a story. A missing person. Someone people would believe was in danger. Someone with a reputation. Calvin Briggs. Denise agreed. Calvin wasn't hard to convince. He owed money too. He was already thinking about disappearing. Hale gave him a plan. Leave town. Change his name. Stay hidden. In return, his debts would be cleared. Calvin took the deal. And just like that, a fake disappearance became the center of everything. But they needed someone to blame. Someone believable. Someone easy. That's when Hale chose Marcus Reed. Quiet. Isolated. No strong connections. He had seen Marcus before. Knew his routine. Knew no one would defend him loudly. So they built the story around him. Denise made the accusation. The argument outside the store gave them a starting point. Hale handled the evidence. Or rather, he controlled what evidence existed. He made sure key details were ignored. Made sure certain reports disappeared. Made sure the narrative stayed clean. Marcus never stood a chance. By the time the case reached court, it was already decided. Hale said everything went according to plan. Until one thing went wrong. Calvin was found. Alive. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not that soon. It started breaking the story apart. People began asking questions. And then Rachel Dunn got involved. Hale said that's when things started collapsing. The witness, the phone records, the connections. It was all coming back. And Denise started to panic. She wanted out. She wanted to talk. She contacted Hale. Said she couldn't keep lying. Said she was going to tell everything. Hale paused when he said this. Looked down at the table. Then continued. He said he tried to calm her down. Told her to stay quiet. But she didn't listen. She kept calling. Kept pushing. And then, he made a decision. 2 days later, Denise Harper was dead. The room went silent. The investigator didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just kept writing. Hale leaned forward and said one last thing. He said Marcus Reed was never supposed to stay in prison this long. He thought the case would fade, that no one would dig deeper, that everything would stay buried, just like Eric Dalton. But he was wrong, because now everything was coming out. Every lie, every detail, every choice. The door opened. Officers walked in. Hale was taken away, this time not as a witness, but as the man behind it all. Weeks later, the court reopened Marcus Reed's case. The conviction was overturned. After years behind bars, Marcus walked free. No celebration, no apology, just silence. The same system that put him there let him walk out without a word. Calvin Briggs was brought back, forced to testify, his role exposed, his deal uncovered, and the truth finally laid out in full. What started as a false accusation was actually a carefully planned distraction, a cover for something far worse. Hale was charged, not just for one murder, but for everything that followed. Eric Dalton, Denise Harper, and the wrongful imprisonment of Marcus Reed. The case that once made no sense finally did. But even then, some questions remained, because investigators later found something else. Something buried deep in Hale's records. Another missing person. Another name. Another case that looked almost identical, which meant one thing. This may not have been the first time, and maybe not the last. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories they tried to bury, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to like and share, because the next story might be even darker.